After the funeral of my father-in-law Daniel, my mother-in-law Kala ran towards me with a wide smile.
Melissa, you finished tidying everything up, right?
Yes. All that's left is to hand it over to the movers when they arrive.
Good. If that's all, I'll handle it myself. So, Melissa.
Kayla exchanged glances with my husband James, and they both nodded. Then, with a nasty grin she could barely hold back, she spat out the words at me.
You're no longer needed. Get out. The maid needs to leave after the divorce.
I let out a small sigh and looked down as if in disappointment. Then, as if giving up, I nodded. All right. It was just as planned. They were delighted, and James immediately pulled out the divorce papers.
Here. Sign them now. I can't have you acting confused and pretending you don't know later.
Honestly, it was all I could do to hold back the urge to sign them as quickly as possible. For me, too, this moment had been long awaited. My name is Melissa. I got married when I was 25, and now it's been 10 years. Before I knew it, I had passed 30 and was now considered to be at an age where pregnancy would be labeled as geriatric. I met James at work. James was 10 years older than me, 35 at the time. When we started dating, it surprisingly felt comfortable, and soon we decided to get married. But at the time, I never would have guessed that this marriage was simply to secure a caretaker for his aging father. What surprised me first was what happened right after we got married. Originally, the plan was for James and me to look for an apartment together. But James casually said to me, without a hint of shame.
Rent is such a waste of money, let's just move in with my parents. It's settled.
This wasn't what we'd discussed. I hurriedly protested.
Wait, but we're newlyweds, aren't we? Starting off by living together with your parents is a bit... No, being newlyweds doesn't matter. You should live with my parents, for their sake. Your parents? Why? Well, my dad needs care. The more hands we have, the better.
This was the first I had ever heard of it.
Huh? But when I met him before, he looked pretty healthy. He was only having a bit of trouble walking back then. You wouldn't have noticed from just a brief meeting,
James said, laughing as if it were a joke. Apparently, his condition had worsened after an accident, and now it was difficult for him to walk. Daniel was already 75 at that time. He was quite old, no doubt. It wasn't surprising that he had physical difficulties. James's parents had a significant age gap, and since they married later in life, Daniel was 40 years old by the time James was born. Honestly, I had never really thought about the age of my in-laws before. But to be 25 years old, marrying a 35-year-old, and suddenly being asked to care for a 75-year-old man? If I had known, maybe I would have given more thought to the age of my spouse's parents. To make matters worse, James delivered the final blow to my already reeling state of mind.
So here's the deal, I'll cover all your living expenses, but in return, you should quit your job, Melissa. Wait, I told you I had no plans to quit working just because we got married, right?
We had agreed on this before the wedding. I told him that unless we had children, I wanted to continue working until I got pregnant. James had agreed to that, I was sure of it.
Huh? Did I really say that? But honestly, working while taking care of someone? That's just not realistic. There are times you might not even sleep at night, you know. For your own good, you should just quit.
The way he said it made it clear that he was expecting me to take on everything. I didn't like it. This wasn't what we talked about. If that's how it was going to be, I'd rather not even get married. Honestly, I'd even consider divorce at this point. Those thoughts were screaming inside my head, but somehow I just couldn't say them out loud. I've always struggled to voice my opinions, constantly worrying about how others feel. And here I was, trapped in the same old pattern. I hated the idea of being stuck as a caregiver. But I was too afraid of seeming heartless to say no. Meanwhile, Kayla was beaming, her smile as wide as ever.
Aren't we lucky you married someone young? I mean, I couldn't possibly handle Daniel's care at my age. And James, well, he's so busy with work. Melissa, you're going to manage the house and take care of Daniel, right? I'm counting on you. Ah, haha.
I couldn't even bring myself to say, sure, leave it to me. I just gave a half-hearted, awkward smile. When we first had our family meeting, I thought Kayla seemed like a nice, straightforward person. But as time went on, I started to realize her true nature. This woman sees everyone around her as her personal staff. In the end, I couldn't bring myself to run away or divorce him, and so my newlywed life began at his parents' house. James told me if I could juggle caregiving, housework, and my job, I didn't have to quit working. But there was no way that was possible, and I quit early on. Living with my in-laws, I quickly realized that this was less like a marriage and more like being a full-time maid. I woke up earlier than anyone, and I went to bed later than everyone. Whenever Daniel needed to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, I was there to help, no matter the hour. And Kayla was so particular about taste and nutrition in meals that if I cut any corners, she'd make sure to let me know.
Melissa, have you ever even learned how to cook? Or are you making the food this salty on purpose, just to spite us? I'm sorry. I'll be more careful next time.
I mean, I've cooked as much as anyone else, and I've been following recipes to the letter. But if Kayla didn't like it, it was never good enough.
This is harder than any job I've ever had.
And the one I should have been able to count on, James, was too busy with his video games and smartphone to ever lend a hand. I found myself wondering why I even got married. Would things have been different if we'd had kids? No. They'd probably just dump childcare on me too. But even those idle thoughts faded, as there was no sign of me getting pregnant anytime soon. The one saving grace in all this was that while caregiving was tough, Daniel himself was a good person. Every time I fumbled with his care, Daniel apologized over and over again.
I'm so sorry to make you take care of an old man like me every day.
Old man? No, don't say that.
I'd hire a caregiver if I could, but Kayla doesn't like having strangers in the house. Even when I suggest it, she just won't listen.
I could imagine the look on Kayla's face, the sheer distaste she'd show at the idea. In fact, it was so easy to picture that I couldn't help but laugh.
Well, I guess that means I'll have to keep doing my best.
Thank you.
But please, make sure you don't overwork yourself.
As we spent more time together, I found myself enjoying my conversations with Daniel more and more. Daniel, too, seemed to be opening up to me, sharing his worries in quiet, private moments. His concerns were not something easily defined or expressed. His family, though well off, had accumulated their wealth and savings from the days when Daniel was still working as an employee.
Before I ended up like this, I could manage everything on my own.
Recently, it seemed that Kayla and James had been secretly withdrawing money without his knowledge.
They're both using cards to take out money, and I don't think they've realized how much the balance has dropped. It seems like they've spent quite a bit already. What? They're taking money without even telling you? That's terrible.
No, if it keeps them happy, I suppose it's fine.
But, you see, it's you who's been looking after me, so I'd like to leave something for you, too.
I just don't know how to do that. That sentiment alone made me feel appreciated.
It's okay. Just talking with you, Daniel, helps me relax.
I thought that if I could continue to care for Daniel until his peaceful passing, that would be enough for me. Before I knew it, 10 years had passed in this way. But time can be a cruel thing. Daniel, who had once been so calm and clear-minded, began to show signs of dementia. At first, it was just small lapses in memory, but gradually, the confusion became more frequent, and his temper grew short.
You took it, didn't you? Give it back now, or I'll call the police.
Your wallet is right here. Please, don't worry. The delusions and paranoia grew stronger, and it felt as if he had become someone else entirely. I kept telling myself that it was the illness, that he couldn't help it. But I often found myself remembering the Daniel who used to be so gentle, and it broke my heart. Then came the nights when he began to shout in rage.
Stop letting him scream like that. People in the neighborhood are starting to give us dirty looks. You need to stay up and watch him.
Kayla, nearly out of her mind, lashed out at me.
I can't. I'm already getting up as often as I can to handle things. But there's no way to prevent this. There's just no way to predict it. Cover his mouth. There must be ways to stop this. Do something. Now. I can't.
You can't just watch over someone and expect to stop this from happening. And to cover his mouth, well, that was out of the question. So I stayed up each night, keeping a close eye on Daniel to make sure Kayla didn't take her frustrations out on him. Daniel, it's okay. Everything's fine. There wasn't any burglar. I checked myself.
Shut up. How can I trust anything you say? Let go of me. Don't touch me. I'll call the police.
Daniel's constant refrain of "I'll call the police" echoed in my ears. There was nothing to do but try to calm him down. 5 years had passed since Daniel's dementia had taken a turn for the worse. Both the care facility and the hospital had been options, but Kayla refused them, so we continued with home care. By then, I was completely worn out. And it wasn't just Daniel who was the problem. Kayla was as selfish as ever, and James was no better. But the sad truth is that humans have an incredible ability to adapt, and I was no exception. It wasn't that I didn't care about the things they said, the constant demands. I had just learned to let it roll off my back, to nod along and agree without resistance. When you stop hoping for things to improve, it becomes a little easier to bear. Even Kayla's hysteria, her sarcastic comments, and her constant nagging no longer fazed me. After years of enduring, I stopped getting worked up over every little thing.
Melissa, the shower and toilet weren't cleaned properly. Especially the toilet, since guests might use it. You need to do a better job.
Kayla sighed and tossed the words out carelessly. In the past, I would have panicked and apologized for small complaints like this. But now, I respond calmly and indifferently. Got it. I'll take care of it when I have time.
When you have time? What kind of lazy excuse is that? Do it now.
All right. James looked at me with an expression of deep annoyance.
You always look so unsatisfied, it pisses me off. You're so gloomy, like you're sucking all the light out of this house.
Yet, they don't ask for a divorce because they know they'd be helpless without me. Neither Kayla nor James could manage the household chores or take care of Daniel on their own. They don't want to stir up unnecessary trouble. Because I made a promise to myself and to Daniel. I would see this through to the end. After that, I'll be out of here in no time. There's little chance that Kayla and James will try to stop me. Once Daniel is gone, they won't need me anymore. They used to prefer the old me, the one who would panic, cater to their moods, and obey without question. Now, the way I just respond quietly, without any emotional reaction, isn't fun for them. Ignoring their insults doesn't give them the satisfaction they want. That's the most frustrating thing for them. I don't regret the decision to marry, but sometimes when I think of my parents, my heart tightens painfully. They'd never imagine that their daughter, who married to be happy, is being treated like this. After I got married, I barely went back home. I couldn't leave Daniel behind. The distance between my family's home and my in-laws is far too great to make a day trip feasible. Even if it were possible, Kayla and James couldn't possibly handle taking care of Daniel for a full day. Once everything is over, I'll tell my parents. For now, I don't want to worry them.
Melissa, you seem so tired. Are you all right?
Yes, I'm fine. Daniel forgets me more often these days. But when he's not caught up in his delusions, he's as gentle as he used to be.
Really? Don't push yourself too hard. You're still a precious daughter to your parents, you know?
Yes. If I told my parents everything, they'd surely demand that I come home. But no matter how hard it gets, I can't abandon Daniel. I'll stay by your side until the end.
Thank you.
Daniel thanked me without fully understanding why, which was so typical of him, yet still, it made me sad. And then, the day finally came. Daniel passed away. It happened just a few days after he turned 90. When I checked on him that morning, he had passed peacefully in his sleep. Seeing the calm expression on his face, I felt a flood of emotions: sadness, relief, loneliness, and a sense of completion. But above all, the relief that it was finally over was the strongest. There was no longer any reason for me to stay here. I informed Kayla and James about Daniel and began to move with a sense of freedom. The funeral went smoothly. The relatives left, and after everything was settled, Kayla came rushing over to me with a huge smile.
Melissa, everything's been taken care of, right?
Yes. All that's left is for the company to come pick things up.
Great. I'll handle that from here. So, Melissa, you can.
Kayla looked at James, and they nodded to each other. Then, unable to hold back her laughter, she sneered at me with a nasty grin.
You're no longer needed. Get out.
As soon as she finished speaking, she threw my everyday handbag at me with a forced politeness. Sure enough, everything I needed was in there. Are you telling me to leave right away? I said quietly, still looking down at the bag, but it was James who answered, not Kayla.
The housekeeper should leave after the divorce.
Seeing that, Kayla's smile grew even wider, filled with smug satisfaction. Together, they looked like children who had just found a new toy. Little did they know that the toy had feelings, quietly setting its own trap. I let out a small sigh, deliberately lowering my head as if in disappointment. Then, as if giving up, I nodded. All right. Everything was going according to plan. The two of them, still acting like children, rejoiced, and James immediately pulled out the divorce papers.
Here. Sign it now. I don't want you pretending later that you didn't agree to this.
He was practically snorting with excitement. But he didn't need to push so hard. I was just barely holding back the urge to sign quickly myself. This moment was something I had been waiting for just as much as they had. As soon as I finished signing, James tried to snatch the papers from me, but I pulled away.
What are you doing? Don't tell me you're backing out now.
Of course not. I just want to make sure everything is finalized with my own eyes. If they kept the divorce papers without submitting them, that would be hell for me. To prevent that, I suggested we go to the courthouse together. Knowing these two, I expected resistance, but surprisingly, they agreed without much fuss.
There's no point in dragging this out. Let's just get it done.
Exactly.
We need to hurry before Walter shows up.
It seems they're going to talk about inheritance and the will today. Apparently, they've always trusted the family's finances to their personal lawyer, Walter. They were in such a rush to get rid of me because they didn't want me involved in that conversation. When the three of us in our black outfits arrived at the courthouse, the staff seemed a bit taken aback. But the divorce papers were processed smoothly.
Now we're officially strangers. Man, 15 years was a long time. Now I'm single again, and with my dad's inheritance coming soon, the future looks bright. We better get home and get ready for Walter. Oh, Melissa, this is where we part ways. Call a taxi or something. You can find your own way back.
They were so determined to keep me out of the inheritance discussions. But there was no need for that. I had no intention of sticking around anyway. Well then, I said, and by the time I turned, the two of them were already getting into their car. Not a shred of sentiment, just pure rudeness until the very end. Daniel, I hope you stay well. I murmured quietly in the direction of the family home and then called my parents to let them know about the divorce. As I got off the plane and headed for the exit, my mother, Sabrina, waved to me with a bright smile.
Congratulations on your divorce, Melissa.
Her words didn't quite match her expression, and I couldn't help but laugh. Thank you. My father, Brian, was waiting in the car, and as soon as he saw my face,
Congratulations on your divorce,
he cheerfully said.
You really did well. Melissa, you're our pride and joy. It's true. I'm so glad you made it back. It's really good that you didn't get stuck in that situation.
Even after that, my parents kept showering me with praise. I couldn't bring myself to tell them everything about my marriage. But somehow, with their intuition as parents, they seemed to know. They kept encouraging their 42-year-old daughter, who had come back after a divorce, with so much warmth and care, and I felt such a sense of relief that I fell asleep on the way home from the airport. Even after we got home, they treated me like a guest. The table was filled with all my favorite dishes. I almost felt guilty about it. Thank you, Dad, Mom.
We're spoiling you for today, but that's it. Yeah, tomorrow you need to start job hunting. We're not feeding you for free.
It had been so long since I'd had a hot meal. Laughing together as the three of us sat down to eat, the food tasted amazing. And for the first time in a while, I woke up in the morning without being disturbed during the night. I stretched out, feeling good, and reached for my smartphone on the bedside table. But the moment I looked at it, my peaceful morning was interrupted by a name I dreaded. Because I had set it to silent mode, I hadn't noticed, but there were countless missed calls from Kayla. Starting as early as 5 a.m. It's fine if she wants to get up early, but that's not an acceptable time to be calling other people. As usual, Kayla was completely oblivious to basic social norms. She probably thinks the world revolves around her. I had a good idea of why she was calling, but there was no reason to return her call at such an ungodly hour. Leaving my smartphone on the bed, I headed downstairs. Mom was already in the kitchen, making breakfast. Should I mention Kayla's calls? As I was debating, the house phone suddenly rang.
What? No, it couldn't be.
I glanced at the clock, just past 7 a.m. Not even Kayla would call my parents' house this early, right? But I had underestimated her. The look on Dad's face as he answered the phone was tense. I couldn't hear the conversation, but from his expression, it was clear the call was unpleasant. After about 5 minutes, he hung up the phone. Dad, was that? He nodded slowly. Apparently, as soon as Kayla started talking, she had demanded to speak to me. Shouting, "I need to talk to Melissa. Get her on the phone." Dad told her that Melissa had divorced and come back home, that she was no longer part of her life, but Kayla wouldn't listen.
She was furious. No matter how politely I tried to explain, it was useless. She was so persistent that I finally just hung up and disconnected the phone line.
Dad, chuckling as he said that, seemed so dependable. But with Kayla, normal reasoning didn't apply. Sure enough, after breakfast, when I checked my smartphone again, there were even more missed calls, dozens of them. She's desperate, isn't she? She must have figured it out. At this rate, she might even show up at the house. As I was pondering what to do, my phone started ringing in my hand. I figured it was better to set up a meeting with her than to let her barge in and cause trouble for my parents. I prepared a call recording app, took a deep breath, and answered.
Finally, you pick up. After all those calls, any decent person would have called me back by now. Don't you think it's rude? I even called your parents, and they didn't understand anything. What's wrong with your family? You all need a lesson in basic manners.
That shrill voice of hers cut through. Not just into my ears, but deep into my skull. And of course, she didn't mention anything about her behavior, only acting like I was the one who was out of touch.
Well, from where I'm standing, calling someone at 5 a.m. is what I would call rude. You.
She clearly hadn't expected me to push back. Thinking back, throughout our marriage, I was always criticized to the point where I eventually gave up even trying to voice my opinions. So, when I shot back a sarcastic response, it must have taken her by surprise. I could almost picture Kayla, stunned, on the other end of the phone.
Strangers? What are you talking about? You were my son's wife just yesterday. See, you just said it yourself. Just yesterday. I've already filed for divorce, so we're strangers now, aren't we? All you do is make excuses. What's wrong with you? You're so rude. You're the one who's been saying rude things to me first. You're shocked now because you're not used to being talked back to, but you've said much worse to me all the time.
Kayla might think being her son's wife gave her the right to do whatever she wanted. But that didn't mean she had free reign over me. I'm human too. I have feelings.
That's because you're lacking. As your mother-in-law, I thought it was my duty to shape you up. Shape me up by dumping all of Daniel's caregiving and housework on me? If you really cared about making me better, there are other ways to do it. Are you really Melissa? You sound like someone else.
I'd always held back before, partly because of Daniel. And partly because I feared that if I pushed too hard, she wouldn't agree to the divorce. I'd been waiting for this moment.
So, what's the real reason you're calling? I don't think either of us is gaining anything from this conversation. It's about the life insurance.
Just as I expected. Back when Daniel was still alert and healthy. He had brought it up first. Melissa, you're not even blood related, but you've done so much for me. Honestly, I'd rather you just get divorced and let you go, but I know they'll never allow it. So, the least I can do is leave you something after I'm gone. Daniel. As grateful as I was for Daniel's intentions, I knew his family might try to nullify his will. That's why we came up with the alternative of naming me as the life insurance beneficiary. Sure, I'd have to pay taxes on it, but it was better than nothing. Daniel had changed it quietly.
You forced Daniel to change it, didn't you? Taking advantage of him when he didn't know any better. Of course, I didn't. And if you check the records, you'll see he made the change before his dementia set in. Feel free to investigate.
Kayla didn't seem to have a retort. I could only hear her frustrated breathing through the phone.
Playing dumb, huh? Then let's meet again and settle this. If we don't, we'll keep hounding you forever.
All right. So, we agreed to meet in person. That weekend arrived. We gathered in a private room at a restaurant located midway between us. Kayla had complained, saying, "Why do we have to go out of our way?" But James had convinced her that the sooner this was resolved, the better. The discussion included James, Kayla, me, and Walter. I had also brought my parents along just in case, under the condition that they wouldn't mention a word during the meeting. It seemed they had noticed the life insurance issue before getting around to the inheritance. So the estate hadn't been finalized yet.
This works out perfectly. We can settle it all at once,
Kayla said smugly. Her words reeked of false bravado. It seems like Kayla wanted to show off by making Walter come all the way here. However, the situation turns out to be completely the opposite of what Kayla expected.
What? What did you just say?
Kayla, her lips trembling, looked flustered at Walter's words. Without changing his expression, Walter calmly repeated the same words. Since Melissa has completed the adoption process, she is included as an heir to the estate. Therefore, Daniel's estate will be divided among the three of you present here. The room fell silent. Once again, it was Kayla who broke the stillness.
That's a lie. Melissa is an outsider. She's not family anymore, she's divorced. There's no way she can inherit anything. That's just ridiculous.
James nodded so vigorously his head seemed like it might fall off, joining in right after Kayla.
She's not even blood related, and she's divorced, so on paper, she's a stranger now. So how can Melissa end up getting the same amount as me?
She may not be blood related, and she may be divorced from you. But since she completed the adoption process, her relationship with Daniel remains. This was completely unexpected. It was true, when we got married, we were told to go through the adoption process for tax reasons and such. But everything after that had been so chaotic that I had completely forgotten. Daniel probably forgot about it too. If he had remembered, he wouldn't have bothered consulting me about the inheritance or life insurance. Kayla and James turned bright red with anger.
You thief! After all we did for you, now that Daniel's gone, you're just trying to take money from us? If I'd known this would happen, I wouldn't have divorced her. Now my share is smaller, and it's your fault. What are you gonna do about it?
It's not like I asked for any of this. The two of them acted like the world was ending, causing a big commotion. Just then, Walter, with a smile, spoke up. This is simply the legal situation, but you do have the option of waiving your inheritance rights. James and Kayla's faces lit up at this.
Right. If she knows her place, she'll decline the inheritance, like anyone with sense would. Yeah. That way, the money will go to the rightful heirs, just like it's supposed to.
It didn't sit well with me to let them have their way so easily. But at the same time, it felt awkward to accept an inheritance when I wasn't even his biological daughter. The life insurance issue was something Daniel had insisted on, and it had taken a lot to convince myself that it was okay.
I don't know.
Seeing me hesitate, Walter stepped in again with a smile. Melissa, you're also listed as the beneficiary of Daniel's life insurance, correct?
Yes, that's right.
I thought he was about to suggest that I should decline out of consideration, but Walter's proposal was a little different. How about this? In exchange for Melissa waiving her inheritance, James and Kayla would agree to never mention the life insurance payout again. Walter continued. Additionally, I would recommend that, for the sake of clarity moving forward, the adoption be legally annulled as well. Essentially, I would forego my share of the inheritance, and the adoption would be nullified, making me a stranger to them all. In return, James and Calla wouldn't contest the life insurance payment I would receive. With this arrangement, I'd only be keeping what Daniel had explicitly intended for me to have.
Yes. That's fine with me.
Calla and James hesitated for a moment, but ultimately, they agreed.
Then I will handle everything from here. Melissa, you can go now. Please take care on your way home.
Walter, who had escorted me out of the store, discreetly handed me his business card.
I'll be in touch soon for further procedures, so please feel free to reach out if needed.
Thank you, you've been a huge help to me. And with that, my connection with James and Calla finally came to a close. However, the story didn't end there. James and Calla had been counting on Daniel's inheritance, but in reality, there was barely anything left. They had both been secretly using up bits of it over time, without realizing that the other was doing the same. It was hopeless. They had both foolishly expected something grand. Worse still, they had taken on debts elsewhere in anticipation of the inheritance. And they'd used up so much that their shares from the estate couldn't even begin to cover what they owed. Now, Calla was working multiple part-time jobs, while James had picked up a side gig at a grocery store to make ends meet. Calla, not used to working, would get upset whenever she was corrected, throwing tantrums. And then feeling crushed when she received complaints. She was constantly on edge. Living with Calla in such a state meant that James had to support her emotionally. As if his main job and side gig weren't exhausting enough, when he got home, Calla would talk his ear off non-stop. On top of that, he had to take care of household chores, leaving him completely drained, both mentally and physically. Apparently, he nearly broke down and tried to call me, but Walter stopped him. Yes, all of this came from Walter's update on their situation. After that, Walter reached out to me and told me everything.
I've actually been friends with Daniel for years. Of course, I had to keep it under wraps from Calla.
Because of their friendship, Walter often stayed in touch with Daniel.
Melissa, he was really grateful to you. Caring for him in his final years, especially with his dementia, must have been incredibly tough. Didn't you ever feel like running away?
Yes, it was hard.
But I had so many memories with him, and I had made up my mind to see it through till the end.
It turns out, Walter was the one who suggested the life insurance. He had warned that the family could end up draining the estate. But that as long as the premiums were paid, life insurance would always guarantee a payout.
Daniel was truly fortunate to have you.
Those words gave me a sense of comfort. Right now, I'm back at my parents' home, and they're still healthy and well. But I know things could change at any moment. There's a difference between caring for your own parents and your in-laws, of course. But the fact that I was able to be there for Daniel until the end gives me a deep sense of accomplishment. I want to make sure I show my gratitude to my parents while I still have the chance.
My Asael is going to give a speech in French. She hasn't been brought up in the same kind of educated environment as us, so please be patient with her.
Upon hearing this, the room buzzed with anticipation. All eyes turned to the groom, who was visibly flustered. I switched on the mic, hoping to put him at ease.
Congratulations on your marriage. Now, without further ado, let me proceed with my speech.
The room fell silent as I began, and out of the corner of my eye, I caught a fleeting glimpse of Emily's faint smile. Then, I began my speech in fluent French. Every now and then, I glanced over at the couple. Emily's frozen smile seemed somewhat out of place.
Why, how?
While working in the fields, I spotted fresh rabbit tracks in the cornfield next door for the first time this year. I paused my work to take in my surroundings and locked eyes with a rabbit and its baby. The mommy rabbit was feeding on grass with its tiny baby, a sight that was truly heartwarming.
Oh, how cute! It's that time of year already, isn't it?
My name is Sarah, and I'm currently 30 years old. Right now, I'm planting corn in a carefully prepared field. This farming work is monotonous and often makes me lose track of time. Before I knew it, it was already evening, so I decided to stretch a little on the spot and call it a day. As I was brushing the dirt off my clothes with my hand, I caught the eye of a familiar farmer who was also getting ready to head home. We exchanged friendly nods. The neighborhood farmers have always been kind, and they taught me patiently even when I was a 16-year-old who knew nothing about farming. I chose not to go to high school and have been living off a mix of farming and part-time jobs. This way of life started when my parents were killed in an accident when I was still in middle school, leaving behind me and my younger brother, Jason. Jason and I were taken in by our maternal grandparents, who treated us with more kindness than anyone else despite our childhood inability to fully understand what was going on. Thanks to them, we were able to quickly recover our smiles without falling into despair. However, our grandmother was frail and often sick. She acted strong in front of Jason and I, but our grandfather, who was supporting her while working, was brave but visibly worn out. Given that we had just moved in, our lives were certainly stretched to the limit. At that time, our grandmother was taking care of house chores and us to the best of her ability, but her health was uncertain, and we didn't know if she would need to be hospitalized long-term. I saw how she tried to act cheerful around us, but I would hear her cough at night, and our grandfather leaving for work before we woke up. Seeing Jason's innocent face sleeping peacefully next to me, I made up my mind not to pursue high school but instead to work. At first, I started delivering newspapers, but because I wanted Jason to go to high school, I took on another part-time job in farming. It was tough at first, but Jason was able to attend high school and focus on his studies. Later, he was accepted to Harvard University. The day I attended his college orientation as his guardian, I was filled with tears of relief seeing his growth. And Jason was able to secure a job at an international company. He often said, "I can't thank you enough, sis, but all I wished for was for our family to be healthy and happy." And now, several years have passed since then. Our grandfather retired and decided to prioritize supporting our grandmother at home. Perhaps our grandmother's health stabilized, being comforted by the constant presence of our grandfather, and now she lives a peaceful life. Today, after work, I was supposed to visit my grandparents' house. Jason, who often travels for work and moves around, rarely gets a chance to see our grandparents, so I make sure to visit them regularly. After cleaning off the dirt, I got in my car and headed to my grandparents' house. As I drove, it got progressively darker, and by the time I arrived, it was completely dark. I parked the car and opened the slightly old door.
I'm home.
Welcome back, Sarah. Hey, Sarah's here. Then, I could hear quiet footsteps from the back.
Sarah, you look well. You haven't had dinner yet, right? It's ready, why don't you join us?
It's been a while, you too. Sure. I'm hungry. When I said that, both of them welcomed me with a smile. I've been away from this house for many years now, but the comfort of my childhood home is something special. As I sat eating dinner with my grandparents, catching up and making small talk, the phone rang.
Who could it be at this hour? Should I get it?
No, it's fine, Sarah. Just sit down and eat your dinner, said my grandmother as she answered the phone. Hello. Oh. It's been a while, hasn't it? I'm fine, how about you? Oh, really? Congratulations. That's great. Oh, wait. Let me get Grandpa on the phone now. I knew immediately from my grandmother's tone that it was Jason on the other end of the line. The phone was passed to my grandfather, who also seemed to enjoy the conversation.
Sarah, you should also talk to him.
It's okay. I can talk to Jason anytime. Oh, is that so? But...
Oh, I'm doing well. I'll let you talk to him now. Here, Sarah, it's Jason.
With a happy look on his face, my grandfather held out the phone to me, leaving me with no choice but to take it. I'm okay, but... Hello?
Sis, long time no see. How are you?
Surprised by Jason's voice, louder and more energetic than I had expected, I gasped a bit.
Long time no see, Jason, I'm good. You startled me with your loud voice, but I'm glad you sound well. What? Am I loud? No way! Grandpa and Grandma just have poor hearing.
As Jason said that, I couldn't help but smile and let out a chuckle.
Heh, that's so like you, Jason. So, you occasionally call like this, huh?
Nah, it's been a while since I last called. I had something to tell you.
Something to tell?
Yeah, I've already told Grandpa and Grandma, but... I'm headed overseas for work.
What? That's amazing. So, they chose you, Jason?
Well, it's not that big of a deal. But you know, it's all thanks to you, sis. Thank you.
What do you mean? It's all because you've worked hard, Jason. So, was this call to tell me you won't be able to return home for a while?
There's one more thing. Actually, I'm getting married at the same time too.
What? Really? Congratulations. I'm so happy for you.
I really wanted to introduce her to you sooner, but I've been too busy with work these past few years. That's why I had to tell you on the phone like this.
That's all right. Being busy is a good thing.
Thanks, sis. So, my assignment is in Paris. I'll be living there for the foreseeable future. We're thinking of holding the wedding there, so come over with Grandpa and Grandma. I'll cover the travel expenses, of course.
Paris.
When I looked at my grandparents, they were beaming, perhaps happy for Jason. But I started to worry that taking the elderly couple on such a trip might be too much for them. Jason, I mean, I'd love to go, but taking these two... I know. It would be bad if something happened. I wanted them there for the special moment. Oh. Then I'll come over before the wedding. When's your next day off, sis?
Me? I have tomorrow off, but after that. Got it. Then I'll bring her over tomorrow. Let Grandpa and Grandma know. What? Wait. That's pretty short notice.
Wait, did you have some plans, sis?
Not really, but mental preparation. You don't need that. She's a really nice girl. I'm sure you'll like her. Oh, I gotta get back to work, so can you tell them? Bye. Wait, hold on.
The call ended abruptly, and I reluctantly hung up.
I see, our Jason getting married, that's wonderful.
That's right, he used to be so small. I'm so happy for him. Oh, Sarah, is the call over? What did Jason say? About that, he's bringing his fiancée over tomorrow.
Tomorrow?
I explained to my surprised grandparents that I was worried about taking the elderly couple to an overseas wedding, and I guessed Jason wanted to meet them before his overseas assignment.
I see. At our age, it's hard on the heart to fly.
Indeed, but if we can see Jason again after so long, let's make a feast tomorrow. Jason has always been smart, but he's always been restless, always thinking on the run, so to speak.
Well, it's good that he's found someone who can support him. Let's celebrate tomorrow.
Then I'll come over early tomorrow and help with the cooking. With that, I started eating the remaining dinner that had been left untouched. The next day, despite being a habitual late riser, especially on days off, I woke up early and headed to my grandparents' house. Despite it only being midday, my grandparents were already busy preparing for the visitors. Seeing their eagerness, I felt my nervousness melting away. As evening arrived, the sound of the sliding door opening echoed through the house.
I'm home.
Jason's vibrant voice was followed by a softer, reserved one, "Hello there." As I went to greet them, I found my brother, whom I hadn't seen for a while, and a lovely lady standing there.
Ah, sis. Long time no see. Let me introduce you to the woman I'm going to marry.
I'm Emily. Nice to meet you.
Oh, I'm Sarah, Jason's sister. It's so nice to meet you. Emily and I shook hands, welcoming the couple into the house.
Emily greeted our grandparents as well. She laughed often, was very outgoing, and quickly became friendly with our grandparents. As we sat around the dinner table, Emily suddenly asked me a question.
So, Sil, you're a fan of lemon on your shrimp? Huh? Oh, yes. I always have been.
Really? Me too. This is the first time I've met someone else who likes it the same way. I'm so happy. Emily's cheerful conversation made her easy to talk to, and we chatted and laughed together. However, I couldn't help but notice Emily's gaze on me when I was talking with others or had to leave my seat for the restroom. I brushed it off, thinking it was perhaps poor eyesight or maybe it's just the way she looked at people. Today wasn't the day to worry about it, as we were here to celebrate Jason's upcoming marriage. The conversation shifted to Jason's future overseas assignment. From there, I learned that Emily had lived in Paris during her junior high school years.
That should make adjusting to life there and any culture shocks easier, right? I asked.
Yes, indeed. The city might look a bit different now, but I think I can manage living in Paris. Plus, I'm really happy to have the wedding in my second hometown.
All of this, including my overseas assignment and meeting Emily, I owe to you, sis. It's all because you encouraged me to go to school back then. I can't thank you enough.
His gratitude made me humble, but Jason kept thanking me throughout the day.
Stop! Come on, like I always tell you, it's all because you worked hard, Jason. But, sis, I wouldn't be who I am today if you hadn't done everything for me. Oh, I remember now, I'd like to ask you to give a speech at the wedding. Me? Well, it is your important day. If you want me to, I'll do it. Really? That's great. Looking forward to it. Don't set the bar too high.
Even at that moment, I felt Emily's gaze on me. However, the dinner went smoothly, and I breathed a sigh of relief. Time flew by, and before I knew it, it was the day of Jason's wedding. From the day I was asked, I had been rehearsing a carefully crafted speech for Jason's big day. As I headed to the venue, I mentally read through the speech, preparing to deliver my brother's once-in-a-lifetime speech. When we arrived at the ceremony venue, I decided to check on Jason first, heading towards the groom's waiting room. As I opened the door to the room, I was surprised to see Jason, still in his everyday clothes.
Ah, big sis.
Thanks for coming. Was it hot outside?
Yeah, I was taken aback by the heat, but I'm fine. More importantly, you haven't dressed up yet. I was looking forward to seeing you in a tuxedo.
You're too eager. We still have plenty of time. As we chat for a bit, I heard the door open. Turning around, I see Emily, the bride, standing there. I tried to greet her, but she cut me off, a knowing look in her eyes.
You made it here all by yourself, Sal. I heard you didn't go to high school, so I was worried about you.
Her loud, inappropriate comment leaves me taken aback in the quiet waiting room.
Huh?
Jason steps in front of me, confronting Emily.
Hey! What the heck? Stop it!
Emily, facing the furious Jason, whimpers, I was just expressing my concern. Why are you blaming me? I watch this unfold and promptly step between Jason and Emily.
Don't get mad, Jason. I'm fine. Today is an important day, right?
If you say so, sis. Jason relents, and the situation settles down. Emily, on the verge of tears over the smallest thing, strikes me as someone who always needs to be the center of attention. Throughout Jason's dating history, some of his girlfriends have been jealous of the bond between us siblings. With that experience, I kept my composure, watching Jason comfort Emily until she stopped crying. And so, planning to leave early and find my seat to rehearse my speech, I started to step away. But then, Emily, who had been crying just moments before, flashed a smile at me.
Oh, and please do your speech in French so everyone can understand it, okay?
She giggled. I was left dumbfounded.
No, sis, you don't have to do that. Emily, don't say such things.
Jason chimed in. At that, Emily's face crumpled as if she were about to cry again.
It's okay, Jason, I understand. I'll practice.
I reassured her. Emily cracked a small, cunning smile, but I quickly left the scene. The wedding began, and seeing Jason getting showered with blessings, looking so content, made me genuinely happy. The wedding continued, and before I knew it, it was my turn to speak. Standing nervously before the mic, I was about to start my speech when a voice echoed from a different mic.
Maya Sael is going to give a speech in French. She hasn't been brought up in the same kind of educated environment as us, so please be patient with her.
Upon hearing this, the room buzzed with anticipation. All eyes turned to the groom, who was visibly flustered. I switched on the mic, hoping to put him at ease.
Congratulations on your marriage. Now, without further ado, let me proceed with my speech.
The room fell silent as I began, and out of the corner of my eye, I caught a fleeting glimpse of Emily's faint smile. Then, I began my speech in fluent French. Every now and then, I glanced over at the couple. Emily's frozen smile seemed somewhat out of place.
Why, how?
I actually once worked part-time in agriculture, and we hosted a French man, 5 years older than me, who was interning there. He was kind, always thoughtful, and I secretly had a crush on him. Looking back, it was my good youthful days. Wanting to deepen my friendship with him despite the language barrier, I borrowed my friend's school French textbook and studied diligently. At first, our conversations were awkward, but at some point, I became capable of casual conversation in French. As my jokes during the speech set the room roaring with laughter, I noticed Emily seemed completely lost. I figured she'd probably forgotten her French after so long abroad. On top of that, her 3 years of middle school abroad had taught her that, unless you're keen on learning, you can get by with just gestures and vibes. Just as it's hard for a child to understand what adults talk about, it seemed unlikely Emily understood everything that was happening. As my speech drew to a close, I saw Jason, deeply moved, crying out loud. Beside him, Emily, clueless as to why Jason was crying. As I finished speaking, the room erupted into applause. Emily, who still had no clue what was happening, started clapping along. When I asked,
"Was that okay?"
in French, she fell silent, her face flushed with frustration. Seeing this, the crowd, guests included, clapped even more. As I was returning to my seat, I heard Emily's shrill voice.
Excuse me, isn't it time for me to change into my next outfit? Why do I know the schedule better than you all? Can't you do your job? Hurry up!
Perhaps she was irritated with me. Emily's tirade against the staff and her behavior towards everyone else remained terrible until the end. But somehow, the wedding concluded without a hitch. Back home in Louisiana, I showed my grandparents the wedding photos and videos. They were thrilled, and even now, months later, they sometimes look back at them, shedding tears of joy. Meanwhile, Jason, who'd moved abroad, started calling more often than before, and the bond between us siblings grew stronger. According to him, many of the guests at the wedding had seen Emily's malicious behavior and arrogant attitude towards me and had grown to despise her. Emily's reputation that she'd built up over the years took a nosedive, and her friends began to drift away. Then Emily started blaming Jason for everything, crying, throwing tantrums, and worst of all, she started to verbally abuse Jason on a regular basis. Having lost all hope for Emily, it seems that Jason was now working on a divorce. A few months later, as usual, I went to see my grandparents, had dinner with them, and the three of us were chatting about recent happenings. Suddenly, the sound of the front door opening resonated, followed by a
I'm home.
I quickly ran to the door.
What? Jason! Why are you not in Paris? Oh, sis! You're here too! Perfect timing! And seriously, even if this place is in the middle of nowhere, you should keep the doors locked. Oh, Jason, welcome back. Paris? Are you done over there?
No, I'm still living in Paris. But I had a business trip to New Orleans, so I decided to swing by. Oh, that smells good. I'm hungry.
Well then, come over here and eat, Jason. Guess what? Jason's back.
Seeing Jason for the first time in a while, my grandparents were happy, their voices naturally rising, and they surrounded the hungry Jason with flying conversations. Amidst all this, I was worried about this think-on-the-run type of Jason.
Jason! It's totally fine that you suddenly came back, but are you okay with your own family matters?
Startled by my somewhat loud voice, Jason flinched, but immediately turned towards me, straightening his posture a bit.
Sis, about that, actually, the divorce has been finalized. So, I wanted to tell you that in person.
I'm really sorry for causing you distress. You've always been there for me, and I didn't mean for this to hurt you. I'm sorry.
Well, if that's the case, you don't have to be so formal about it.
It's all in the past now. No, but I hurt you too, sis. I'm really sorry. After that, Jason insisted that he was fully responsible for making me feel bad. Then, with a voice on the brink of tears, Jason said that even my decision not to pursue higher education was initially his fault, and he kept apologizing over and over again. Seeing this, I gently put my hand on Jason's shoulder, speaking to him softly.
Jason, that incident wasn't your fault. Don't worry about it anymore. I'm not bothered by it anymore either,
I assured him. I saw a look in his eyes that suggested he still had something to say, so I quickly added,
Going out into society earlier than others has taught me a lot. I've met wonderful people, and I've experienced many happy moments. And now, being able to be here with my family. I consider myself very fortunate.
Upon hearing this, Jason, with tears welling up in his eyes, muttered, You're really the best, sis.